Good evening and welcome to the 2016 Minnesota State Senate District 55 Forum being held at the Shakopee campus of River Valley Church. Tonight's debate is being sponsored by the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau. My name is Rob O'Neill. I'm the pastor of Brookwood Community Church, a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and I will be moderating tonight's debate. Our candidates this evening are Mr. Ali Ali and Senator Eric Pratt. Would you welcome our candidates, please? Candidates are arranged this evening in alphabetical order. They'll have 2 minutes to make opening statements, after which I'll have the opportunity to ask them questions. They'll have 1 minute to respond to each question. In some cases, they'll be given 30 seconds to rebut their opponent's remarks. And as moderator, I have an opportunity to ask a follow-up question, in which case candidates will have 30 seconds to answer that follow-up question. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes to make their opening statements, and we'll begin with Mr. Ali.
Thank you. I want to thank Shakopee Chamber of Commerce, and thanks to all of you who are here tonight to participate to this forum. And I want to thank my wife, Sabira, my kids, and my friend, James. Well, my name is Ali Ali, and I was born in a small, tiny country in the Horn of Africa, French old colony. And I grew up a second-class citizen. And I flew as the country for Ethiopia. And then 18 years ago, my brothers and I make a new journey to this country. And I became a U.S. citizen 11 years ago. Since then, I was fully active politically. There is 2 things you can do as a citizen. The first one is to serve in the military. Unfortunately, I was too old. The second one is to serve as an elected official. That's what I'm planning to do. I am kind of a little different breed than others. And I know what is mean oppression. And I know the difficulty. And I know that not having able to provide, not having a shelter, not having enough for food or health care. And I guarantee you that if you will give me opportunity, I will fight for you. I'm not owned by nobody, nor party, nor millionaire, or interest group. I will be your representative. I will answer only to you. And also, I would like to focus on education, equality, gender equality, healthcare, and transportation. I'm also willing to work and compromise, regardless the outcome of next election. If I'm elected, I won't make any political calculation. I will do what is right for our community, what is right for our state. Thank you.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Rob, and thank you to River Valley Church and the Chamber for having me. My name is Senator Eric Pratt. I'm just finishing my first term in the Senate. As many of you know, I had the honor of replacing Senator Claire Roebling after 16 years of public service that she gave this community. I grew up here in Scott County. My mom taught in Shakopee for 25 years. In fact, I often say that more people know me still as Mrs. Pratt's son than they do as Senator. I have a degree in economics, and I put myself through graduate school when I got my MBA. I'm now a senior vice president at U.S. Bank. I continue to work full-time while I do my legislative job, because I think it's important that we have citizen legislators, not full-time legislators. And keeping it's so grounding to keep a foot back in the real world. Now, I'm also fortunate in that I've got the opportunity, and I think many of you saw the article, where my employer is able to work with me to allow me to do both. I'm also blessed that I have my wife, Tina. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary this year, and we have 2 wonderful kids, both in college. I served on the Prior Lake School Board for 12 years, and I currently serve on the Ford Next Gen committee for Shakopee Schools, and I'm also a member of the St. Gert's Board of Directors. Prior to that, I was part of the Prior Lake strategic planning. I led efforts at the school board to do some strategic planning. I've also been very active in the church doing meals, Wesley meals up in Minneapolis, as well as a number of other things, coaching youth sports as well. So I look forward to a good debate, a good forum, and look forward to continuing to serve as your senator.
Candidates, what experiences outside of government have made you fit to represent the voters of Scott County? Senator Pratt, you've listed some. We'll begin with you.
Well, thank you. I mentioned an article that U.S. Bank recently wrote about me, and one of the questions was, what are you able to bring to your work that you learn at the Capitol? And I thought about that, and I thought, really, working in the corporate world and being able to influence without authority is a tremendous skill to be able to have by working in the legislature. If I'm working with another department and we don't see eye to eye, I've got to come to an agreement with them. If I'm in the legislature and one of my colleagues and we don't see eye to eye, I have to be able to work with them. I have to be able to influence them. And that's what this job is about, is influence. I don't have the ability as one of 67 senators, one of 201 legislators, to be able to say, this is what we're going to do. I have to convince a majority of the others that I'm right. And I also have to be humble enough to understand I don't have all the answers, and they may have some of the right answers as well.
Mr. Ali, you have already also spoken about some of your outside experiences, but what experiences outside of government have made you fit to represent the voters of Scott County?
At an early age, my parents had me personal responsibility and also responsibility for the community. Through my life, from the age of 15, I start campaigning for women's rights. Like I said earlier, I grew up a second-class citizen. My entire life was fighting for the right. At the meantime, and I know what it takes to negotiate, to be able to work with others. Through my life, wherever I went, I tried to make a difference and to understand, always find a solution with others. I am the leader of my community in this country. I also represent the people where I come from, Horn of Africa, in this country. And I'm not scared and afraid to take a risk. And I'm willing to work with anyone, regardless the consequences may occur from party or the interest group or others.
Well, continuing on the theme of representing diversity, how could you or would you connect with our culturally diverse community so that everyone's voice is heard? Mr. Ali, we'll begin with you.
Well, where I come from itself, the country I was born, we have two different groups. And the neighboring country that always have my ethnic group, there are 86 different ethnic groups. And we are able to live side by side and peacefully. Of course, there is challenges in this country because of the history of this country. But so far, look at, I'm living in a suburb. I already make the move. My daughter did not cover themselves. My wife doesn't have my last name. We already move, myself, and many of us, we already be integrated. We don't see ourselves different than others. We integrate with people from different culture. It's a multicultural country. I am willing to improve. In the last 2-3 months, I make a lot of friends. My community or my relationship extended. That's why I'm willing to do work with anyone I have done in the past. I am willing to do moving forward.
Senator Pratt, how would you connect with our culturally diverse community so that everyone's voice is heard?
Well, thank you. That's a really great question. And it's actually been somewhat of a struggle, I think, for me. But I appreciate what Mr. Ali said about coming here and integrating and not seeing himself as different. Because I believe that in Scott County, we welcome anybody who's willing to come here, wants to raise their family, get a great education, and contribute back to the community. That's what we're here for. That's why we serve on school boards. That's why we serve on city councils. That's why we serve on planning commissions and volunteer committees. And so Representative Luna and I have been out in the community. I've gone to, I've gone to a number of events. I always try to accept an invitation if I can. I try to make my own introductions, but sometimes it helps to be invited, and I hope that our community feels approachable to me.
Can I follow?
Certainly. 30 seconds to rebut.
For instance, a couple of weeks ago, Eric and I, we meet each other for the first time. When we went work together, Al Huda Daycare Center was vandalized. We didn't know each other. We all work together, ripping the carpet, but not by himself, but together, regardless of our culture, regardless of our political affiliation. That's really touched me. People from around Metro, they all come with toys, with money, and with their help. That was very, very moving. And I know we can do it, and we can improve it.
Time. An unusually high percentage of American voters are dissatisfied with the Democrat and Republican nominees for president and still consider themselves undecided. Do you support your party's candidate for president? Why or why not? And what does your support for that candidate or your lack of support say about you as a candidate? Senator Pratt, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think we can all agree it's a disappointing year when we look at the two candidates that have made it through the presidential election. We have one that has said some very offensive things. We've had another that has done some very offensive things. When I think of why I'm a Republican and how I hold my standard, I think of Ronald Reagan as someone who believes in the American dream and the virtue of opportunity. I'm not here to say what I've never endorsed Mr. Trump, but I really don't know yet how I'm going to vote. I know I can't support the other candidate for the actions that she's taken, but I won't apologize for what Mr. Trump has said, and I wish we had somebody else leading this party.
Mr. Ali, do you support your party's candidate for president? Why or why not? And what does your support or lack of support for that candidate say about you as a candidate?
And I do support our nominee Hillary Clinton for president, and I think she's qualified. I think she has the experience. I'm not just supporting her because I'm a father of a beautiful daughter, because she's a woman. I think she's more qualified than Mr. Trump. And she has experience, and she's been tested, and she's ready to lead in the first day. We are dealing with a very volatile world, and not very easy to resolve the problem we have. We have Middle East in the mess. We have problem in Ukraine. So in order my reason to support that, and I know Hillary Clinton can come with a solution for this problem. I would love to also invite my friend Eric, if he's not ready to vote for him. I will show that we can do bipartisan. He can, one time can cross over and vote for Hillary. Thank you.
Can you give an example of one issue on which you differ from your party's political position, Mr. Ali? One example of an issue where you differ from your party's political position.
I think that the sad part, when you come to labeling, do I am 100% liberal or I am 100% conservative? I have both in me. I grew up as a conservative, but the problem is those issues, we've been divided, and Republican red and Democrat blue. But I think what I would love to say that is the first time in my life that I become part of something big in the United States. I don't want this country be destroyed within by the American people, not from the Russian, not from Al-Qaeda, or not from the Chinese. What is lacking is why, once and for all, they come together as a one people and try to put the differences aside and use what we have in common in order to move forward and to prepare this country for better generation.
Pardon me. Senator Pratt, could you give an example of a way that you differ from your party's political positions?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, and one that I don't know that I can necessarily answer, because my experience in the legislature is that behind closed doors we work very well together. We only fight when the cameras and the reporters show up. Other than that, we do a good job of working together, and I've sponsored a number of bipartisan bills. And I've actually influenced some of my colleagues to agree with me, particularly in the area of education, where I sit on the Education Committee and have been acting as the minority lead for the last 2 years. We often agree on the problems. We often agree on what the outcome could look like. Where we disagree is how to get there. And that's where all the wrangling comes in, is deciding which way to go, you know. So I don't know that there's as much partisan divide in the issues as much as there is in the methodology.
Candidate, oh, yes, sir, Mr. Ali.
Well, the other problem I would like to highlight that most of our elected officials are staying too long. There is no, I think it's about time to reform and have a limit how long a senator can serve. When you have someone serving 40 years, at the end you become a dictator. That's what's going on around the world. We trying to criticize and to try to make changes around the world, but at the meantime, we have people staying in power for over 50 years. Of course, they become corrupted in the end.
Pivoting now to transportation and asking very broadly, how are we going to get workers to Shakopee that we need for the businesses in Shakopee? Senator Pratt, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think there's a number of options that we're looking at, but I think one of the most exciting was a bill that I helped sponsor, which was to test a suburb-to-suburb bus transit line. Now, we tried the first one. It went from Shakopee up to Maple Grove, and it didn't work. We didn't have enough people riding the bus. We learned a lot from that experience. We learned that you had to be able to get people not only to a transit station, but to the last mile in order to get to their job. We're now going to be testing a road or a route that goes from the Mall of America and hooking up with the light rail line to come down to Shakopee to hopefully bring some workers here. I know Representative Lunan has brought me in on some discussions looking to bring people from Brooklyn Park down to Shakopee, where they've got 25% unemployment rates, and we have jobs waiting to be filled. And so it's that type of creative thinking that we need to do.
Mr. Ali, how are we going to get the workers to Shakopee that we need for our businesses?
And I think we have to put all options on the table. You know that I think Metro Transit is a good system. They try and just Eric mentioned it. We need to expand that. At the meantime, we have to include the company and those businesses who's in dire need of qualified worker that provide bus services. One example is I even worked myself for 5 years in Mystic Lake Casino. They provide buses. They bring people from all over the metro areas. That's one. Another thing is about maybe time to give a serious consideration for light rail, who could maybe help to bring people, you know, from other city to our area. Always can create businesses by doing that. And we have to always try to improve. We don't have to stick in one subject, but to look which way we can benefit, and of course with little cost as possible.
Well, continuing on the subject of transportation, what types of investments do you think we need to make in our transportation infrastructure, and what other types of infrastructure investments do you believe we need? Mr. Ali.
Well, so far, I think the transportation bill, you know, felt the last minute. It's sad that we couldn't have this bill move forward. When the sticking point was the two bill, Republican stick with one, and the Democrat have their own. I am willing to combine both. I'm willing to bring both ideas. If we couldn't agree and we stick with the bill, let's come together. If your idea, my idea, put together and try it. But otherwise, it will be costly if we wait too long in order to improve our bridges. And also, I am for light rail. I believe in the long run they're going to benefit. We have to think ahead of ourselves, not 20 years from now. And we need to compete with other states. And I think that's the only way we can move our good. Our elderly can go to the hospital, or our kids can go across the city to a university or schools.
Senator Pratt, what kinds of investments do you think we need to make in our state's transportation infrastructure, and what other types of infrastructure investments do you believe we need to make?
Well, I think certainly we all understand that we need additional money going into road and bridge construction, not only to repair the roads that we've currently got on the system and the bridges that a high percentage of them are listed as deficient, but also to increase the capacity. We started, my first year in the Senate, we started a program called Corridors of Commerce, where we started funding those roadways, those routes, where we see most of our commerce. And 169 and 169 corridor is certainly one of those primary economic drivers of this state, where 50% of the agricultural product of this state ends up on 169. Now, Mr. Ali and I disagree on the light rail. It's $120 million per mile versus $1 million a mile per road. We could be looking at other options besides light rail, whether it's bus rapid transit or additional bus routes, but we need to stay flexible.
Yes, Mr. Ali.
That's what, think about it, like Eric said, we may disagree, that's fine. The problem is, it will be too late when we're gonna find out that the price went up. There's nothing we can do about it in order to invest. The problem, we need to invest now. When like I say, you have to have a courage, you have to have a gut to say, hey, I don't like it, when I go for it. That's what even though the Democrat doesn't like his idea, I will vote for it. That's the only way we can achieve things. But otherwise, if we fall apart, if we don't get able to negotiate, none of us have enough vote to move forward. We're stuck.
Thank you. Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you. And you know, I think we get hung up on some of the solutions rather than the problem we're trying to solve. The problem we're trying to solve is to move people from one place to another, to get them from home to job. Whether it's rail or bus or car, it really doesn't matter. We've got to figure out how to get people down here. And right now we're so focused on light rail, which maybe just isn't ready for this time. And the cost may go up in the future, but we've got other options that are more cost effective and can move people just as efficiently.
Candidates, what impact do you see the state government having on business starts and expansion, and what can be done to encourage business starts and expansion? Senator Pratt, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think there's a number of things. This is not a business-friendly state. It's just a fact. We have we have the 6th highest tax rate in the country. And we're losing people who invest in businesses, according to the Minneapolis St. Paul magazine. So far we've lost $1.5 billion in taxable income that's moved out of state, and that's expected to continue for the next 5 years. Now, I actually sponsored a bill with Senator Fong He in St. Paul that would create tax credits for building or expanding a business in an area of high unemployment. The hope there is that we start to get people off of government assistance and we put a job where it's accessible. Not where they have to travel 30 miles or 45 minutes to get to, but we give them a job where it's accessible. And a business now gets a tax break and makes it affordable to build there. So those are the types of solutions I'd like to see.
Mr. Lee, what do you see the state government effect you have of the state government on business starts and expansions, and what can be done to encourage business starts and expansions?
I think even though our state is a very high tax bracket, but we provide a lot. Our citizens expect a lot from our government. The government provides a lot of service. Those services cost a lot of money. I think it's already intensive for businesses, for start businesses. I think it start with $135,000 for tax intensive. I think it's in 2003, you guys vote tax relief for businesses. But I think we should not only focus on those businesses, but also people who work for businesses. If we give tax intensive to those workers will spend money on those businesses, and that will create, more money for business and for the state as well. So we have to also invest in job training. If we have a good skilled worker, I think the company won't leave the state. Maybe we don't invest enough in education. That's why those companies leaving rather than taxes.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you. I'd like to remind Mr. Ali, I'm just in my first term. I wasn't there in 2003. But I was there in 2013 when we raised taxes $2 billion on the state of Minnesota, on every single Minnesota person. And what we did also at that time, or what the majority did, was they imposed a high tax rate on sub-S corporations. Those are corporations where the income of their business flows through their personal tax forms. Small business people are dying because of that. They can't make it work. And that's what we need to be able to fix if we want to create small business and opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Mr. Ali,
well, at the
follow-up.
meantime, this is a good idea. It's good we give relief, a job creator, or small businesses. But at the meantime, we have to replace the loss. So it's not only one good solution. I think we're willing to work, willing to listen, and find a compromise which way we're going to be able to help the business in need rather than just cutting taxes.
Candidates, nationally, the gap between the wealthiest Americans and the majority of Americans has grown in recent decades. Is this a problem, and what would you do about it here in Minnesota? Mr. Ali, will begin with you.
The third part is our system is built that only the top 1% will benefit. We are here to serve the rich rather than the middle class. And I think we give too many taxes. We saw recently in the national news that most of billionaires have the write-off, have good lawyer to find a way not to pay taxes at all. So therefore, I think it's about time to raise taxes in those top rich people to pay their fair share, because they take advantage of us, they take advantage of the country, of workforce. So with something wrong with the tax law, and nationally, I think it needs to be fixed. I need even, Warren Buffett say, his secretary shouldn't pay more than him. He's a billionaire. He asked him, we should tax them more in order to balance. Otherwise, in the last 20 years, is widening. We get poorer, and the rich get wealthier.
Senator Pratt, is the wealth gap in America a problem, and what would you do about it here in Minnesota?
Well, excuse me, the wealth gap is a problem, but it's not about this concept of fair share, this idea that we tax the fair share. First of all, we've never really defined what fair share is. It's just a concept out there, but what is fair share? The top 20% of our individual filers pay almost 65% of the income tax that comes in. Now, what we're doing is we're putting on regressive taxes, sales taxes, gas taxes, gambling taxes, all the pull tabs, and those are more regressive, and they're hitting the lower income people even harder. Also, we've got a period of time where we've got more people on public assistance following the policies that Mr. Ali has espoused. And so what we need to do is really follow what Senator Wellstone said, and I don't usually agree with him, but we all do better when we all do better.
Thank you, candidates.
Right.
Mr. Ali, a
I
follow-up?
think is another issue that if we invest in preschool, if we invest in kindergarten, if we put enough resources in our school and our university, public university, I think we can overcome those challenges. But we don't put enough resources when needed. Therefore, uneducated people cannot fully use their potential. That's what is lacking. We must invest in education. We must invest in early childhood education before it's too late.
Well, candidates, yes, Senator.
Well, thank you. I was hoping we'd get to education at some point. You know, we have been trying to put money in education. Unfortunately, the governor has been more interested in creating new programs in education rather than investing in the basic needs of students. And in fact, I put forth a bill that would have increased the funding to schools by 3% and taken away the mandates and not started any new programs. Now, the preschool that Mr. Ali says will cost the state $1 billion. That's $1 billion out of every classroom. Now, again, the idea is that we all do better when we all do better.
Thank you, candidates. You have both already begun to answer this question as a yes, but do you believe there are Minnesotans who are not paying a fair share of taxes? Who are they, and are they paying too little or too much? Senator Pratt, will begin with you.
You know, I'll go back to the concept of I don't know what fair share means. When we talk about fair share as an economic student, it's not an economic policy, it's a political policy. That's what it is, it's the politics of envy. Now, I believe that every Minnesota family is paying too much. We raised taxes $2 billion in 2013. And then the next session, we came back and the Senate Democrats wanted to raise another $2 billion in transportation taxes, raising gas taxes to what would have been the third highest gas tax rate in the country, raising your tab fees, raising the sales tax on automobiles, making those items out of reach of the standard family. Do you know the threshold for the top 20% is $140,000 in a household? And I'd say that's more of a middle-class family than a rich family.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Ali, do
I
you believe
think-
there are Minnesotans who are not paying their fair share of taxes? Who are they, and are they paying too much or too little?
Well, that's what I would say. That Eric said that we do better when we all do better. If that was the case, we shouldn't have the wealth gap between rich and poor. Doesn't mean we don't all do better. I will say the same thing, that I strongly believe that the rich people have more resources, they have more money. Most of us live check pay by check pay, even though we pay taxes. We have no option. But at the meantime, and I think they should pay a little bit more, we enjoy what we have. Think about it. Minnesota, high taxes, good road, good school, safe neighborhood. We're moving forward. We are not going backward. So in order for us to invest again in our education, in our healthcare, our transportation, we need more taxes from the top.
Senator.
Well, I'm glad to hear Mr. Ali agree with the fact that when we all do better, we all do better. And boy, I keep quoting Paul Wellstone. That seems odd for a Republican. But what I hear from Mr. Ali, and when he talks about the fair share, is the politics of envy. And that's not what we're trying to solve for here. He's right, we've got parents and families working paycheck to paycheck because they are paying too much in taxes. And quite honestly, the state's overstepped its boundaries. We need to put more local control in place so that when I disagree with a policy, I can go to my city council person or school board member.
Candidates, we are the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce, so we'd like to ask a question about Shakopee, if we could, please. Beginning with you, Mr. Ali, what do you hope to do that would most directly influence the lives of the voters of Shakopee specifically?
Could you repeat?
What do you hope to do as state senator that would most directly influence life for the voters of Shakopee specifically?
I think education will be the best answer, I believe, because all parents are struggling. And most of them, we're not rich people in Shakopee, and we are not able to provide adequate education for our children. We cannot. I'm a father of 6 children. There is no way I can pay college education for my 6. I think what we can do is invest more money in pre-K and make affordable or why not free college education. Public education is supposed to be free. We're the only nation in the world who have crippling debt for students. Germany, France, next Canada, many countries in the world having good education for free. Even though we are the wealthiest, we have financial means, and we can do it, but we're not doing it because we're stuck again with the big money. It's all about money. Money is supposed to be out of politics.
Senator Pratt, focusing on Shakopee for a second, in your first term as senator, what have you done for the voters of Shakopee that has had the most direct impact on our lives?
Well, I can name a couple of things. One a little bit controversial in that I was able to push through the prison fence for the Shakopee Women's Facility. Not everybody in town agreed with that thought, but to me it was about public safety. That we had a prison that wasn't built to hold that many people without any sort of security, and we had people walking into the prison. What we've done is we've built a very, I think, respectable perimeter around the facility so that it keeps the property values from deteriorating. I also, for Shakopee and Scott County, led the efforts for disaster relief following the 2014 floods. And there were a lot of people in Shakopee and the rest of Scott County that suffered tremendous losses, and we were able to do what we've done for every other disaster.
Let's focus on the workplace for a couple of questions now and begin by asking, what do you think the state's minimum wage should be and why? Senator Pratt?
Boy, minimum wage is one of those things that economists have been talking about for a long time. I think we need some stability in the minimum wage right now. We need to take off the inflator that we have and let it just percolate through. And I'll give you an example. A friend of mine used to run a pizza restaurant, and he told me that when you sell a pizza, about a third of the cost of the pizza is for labor, about a third of the cost goes to ingredients, and about a third of the cost goes to overhead and profit. And so let's just say you have a worker at $9 an hour and you have 4 workers, that's $36. You need to sell 9 pizzas every hour in order to break even. Now, if we raise that minimum wage to $15, one of 2 things has to happen. He has to either increase his price or decrease his workforce. And that's why I think we've got to look at more of a market-related solution.
Mr. Ali, what do you think the state's minimum wage should be and why?
I think it's very, very complex topic, and we didn't really come out with a good solution so far. But like we all know now, the slogan is $15 per hour. I'm sure it's a lot for a small business, but moving forward, you know, within a couple years, 3, 4, 5 years, I think we're supposed to be able to reach a $15. I say why? Because many Minnesotans live under standard pay. They're having 2 jobs. They work in 2 jobs. Even myself, I work 2 jobs for many years in order to provide for my family. So we must really focus on and try to improve the life of those mothers or fathers in order to live out of poverty. And I know we can do it.
Senator Pratt.
Well, I think Mr. Ali brings up an interesting point, but the issue, the Federal Reserve out of San Francisco just recently released a study. Now, if you look at, and they draw this distinction between low-wage and low-income families. 57% of low-income families have nobody working. They don't have anyone from 18 to 64 actually working, so an increase in the minimum wage won't help. 46% of workers in low incomes make more than the minimum wage, but their hours are cut. That's the issue.
Okay, candidates. Mr. Ali,
Well,
another
again,
rebut.
we wouldn't have to deal with underpaid class citizens. We can call them second. They're in second position. So if we would invest early in kids' education, K-12, public university, and community college, we wouldn't be there because we have a well-educated and a skilled worker who could have made more money, and we don't have to deal with that.
Thank you. Well, the cost of individual plans through MNsure Healthcare Exchange are expected to rise more than 50% in 2017 as some health insurance providers exit the program, saying that they're simply unable to make a profit. There are broad calls for the system to be overhauled. Governor Dayton has called the program created under the Federal Affordable Care Act no longer affordable. What do you think should be done with MNsure, and how would you address the rise in health insurance costs? Mr. Ali, will begin with you.
Well, I believe the Affordable Health Care Act, we didn't go enough. The problem was from the beginning. Why? Because the control was at the hand of corporation, a pharmaceutical company. When the private side is all about bottom line, what we need to do is to be able to negotiate like a VA with the pharmaceutical company for prescription drug. On the other hand, I won't go even further. We should have one single-payer healthcare system in the United States. We are the only nation on earth, as we speak, who doesn't provide the basic for their citizen. The healthcare for all is supposed to be a right, not a privilege. It's too late. We are far behind. If Canada can do it, if France can do it, America can do it. And we have the money, we have the knowledge, we have the potential. And that's what I will fight for.
Senator Pratt, what do you think should be done with MNsure, and how would you address the rise in health insurance costs?
Well, I think it's interesting that Mr. Ali proposed a socialized medicine and claims we're the only country that doesn't provide it. And yet, here we are, the best healthcare system, best healthcare provider in the world. We have people coming all over the world to seek our services. Why? Because their socialized medicine isn't working. There's not enough capacity in their systems to be able to provide the services that people need. We're here, we're able to ramp up the capacity as we need it. It takes 6 months in Canada to get an MRI. Now, what we do need to do is bring the market back into this. Now, MNsure was passed on a completely partisan vote. Mr. Ali talks about cooperating and working around the aisle. Republicans came with many ideas. And in fact, we even predicted some of these outcomes as far as loss of participants in the individual market and these extreme rises in premium. So we need to bring back the high-risk pool, the state high-risk pool, and we need to be able to start to reinsure some of those high-risk folks.
Well,
Mr. Ali?
Socialize. That's the big fear-mongering, socialism, socialize. That's the most socialist country. We are bailing out company, for God's sake. We give him billions of dollars. Whenever the company go down, we bail them out. Why we should not able to bail out our poor? Why we cannot provide health care for our poor? We can do it. It's nothing to do with socialism. That's just a scare tactic. If we can socialize the company, big corporation, we can do that for our people. We own that to them.
Senator Pratt, 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you. We could have provided insurance. In fact, if you look at the MNsure enrollees, almost every one of them qualified for a program before we implemented the Affordable Care Act and forced them into it and created this monstrosity called MNsure that's causing prices to rise, and we've done nothing to bend the cost curve. And so at some point in time, if we go into a socialized program, we'll either have to raise the cost to the point that it's unsustainable or start to ration.
Well, actually, gentlemen, we're going to have to move to our last
Another one,
question at this point.
I think it's maybe if that's cost too many, we shouldn't be in the same healthcare system like U.S. Congress, and we all will be fine.
10 seconds.
No, I'm good.
What do you think needs to happen to the level of funding of education in Minnesota? And if you're for additional funding, how would you spend it? If you prefer to keep it the same, how should schools meet the growing demands on them? And if you're in favor of cutting it, what do you think should be cut? We'll begin with Senator Pratt.
Finally, an education question after spending 12 years on the school board. I sat through a number of years of flat funding for education. And for those of you that don't know, 85 cents out of every dollar that goes into education goes to salaries and benefits. Now, I actually proposed an increase in the per pupil funding that would have put money into your local school board to meet the needs that they have. Because what we tend to find is that the needs of Shakopee are different than the needs of say, Minneapolis or Sartell, if you want to go down that route. And so we need a local board that makes those decisions and how best to do it. But we do need to put more into the basic formula. When I look at education, I look at really four things. Is it good for students' achievement? Do we have great teachers in the classroom? Do we have stable, reliable funding? And do we have community involvement and input?
Mr. Ali, what do you think needs to happen to the level of funding for education in Minnesota?
Well, I believe, think about it. For instance, if state government is supposed to provide for our school, and they're not doing it, that's why across our district or across the state, the property tax went to the roof. And I believe we need more funding. Funding is supposed to come from state government. Also, I think we need to tackle, again, with the top percent to pay more or their fair share in order to provide for education. At the meantime, I do believe agree that more decision for a school need to be decided locally. A district level is supposed to be in charge of what is good for them rather than from the top to the bottom.
Well, our time is coming to a close this evening, and if you've not had the opportunity to have the issue that you wanted to have addressed this evening, you have the availability of our candidates after the forum this evening. You can also contact their campaign offices or get in touch with them through their digital presence. But now each candidate is going to have an opportunity to make a 2-minute closing statement, and we will begin with Mr. Ali.
I want to thank Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank Eric that we really have a very civic discussion and debate. And I want to thank each one of you to be here tonight to listen to us. Well, I am running for office. I am running for you. It's your idea. I want to listen and to put into action. I will do my best to represent you, the people, not the corporate interest. It's my wish to bring our share progressive and constructive idea to state capital in St. Paul. Education I want our children to fully participate 21st century education. And we need world-class education. I will increase funding for K-12, a public university. And I will make sure that our sister, our daughter, get equal pay for equal work. It is about time to close the discrimination against women. It's overdue. I am planning to end it. We must also do everything in my power to make each one of you is covered without worry, switching between food and buying medication. And will also do my best to invest in our infrastructure. It's about time to focus and to build and to maintain our bridges and street and roads. And we should also give a serious consideration for light rail. And if I have the privilege to serve you, I guarantee you I won't be scared. I won't calculate about the incoming election. I will be your voice, regardless the outcome of the next year. I'm not planning to serve the rest of my life as a senator of District 55 in St. Paul. I will be your voice. I hope I convince you tonight to vote for me. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, and thank you to the Chamber in River Valley for hosting this again. It's a humbling experience to be able to represent the area that you grew up in, and I cherish that every day. I also talked about the fact that I maintain my full-time job because I don't view this as my career. I view this as my service, just like I served on the school board, just like I served St. Gertrude's as an unpaid director, just as I serve Shakopee schools in their Ford Next Gen initiatives. And that's what we're talking about, is service. I am your servant, and my door is always open, and I always have an ear. I'm also, and one of the things when I was campaigning the first time that struck me, I heard it a number of times, but one gentleman here in Shakopee said it best of all. He said, I'm not voting for someone who's just going to go up and push a red button or vote against something. I want someone who's going to work to get things done. I want someone who's going to find something to be for, not to be against. And that's what I've tried to do. And so as a founding member of the Senate Purple Caucus, we have an equal number of Republicans and Democrats that get together on a regular basis. We have breakfast. We talk through the issues. We don't always agree. We find the areas that we agree on, and we move forward with those. And we try to work through those areas where we disagree. We don't see eye to eye, and most of the time it's not the what, it's the how. It's not what the problem is, it's how you solve it. And we've got very different philosophies. In fact, I'll never forget, I was sitting with one senator one time, and I got kind of frustrated with him. I said, well, Greg, how can you believe that? And he said, well, remember, we're from different parties. We have different philosophies. It's okay, Eric. And I remembered that. And that's how we go through this. It's about being able to work across party lines. It's about being able to work for the people of Minnesota. It's about being able to work for the people of Scott County. I hope I've done a good job, and I hope I've earned your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
The views expressed in tonight's debate are those of the candidates and not those of the Chamber and Visitors Bureau. The Chamber is sponsoring this event as a service to the community and has gone to great lengths to ensure the objectivity of this forum. The Chamber does not endorse any candidate, but seeks to provide you, the voters of Shakopee, with the information you need to make an informed choice. Thank you to our audience this evening. Thank you to our hosts, River Valley Church, and to Shakopee Kids Voting. On behalf of the Shakopee Chamber and Visitors Bureau, thank you as well to our candidates. We appreciate your time, your candor, and the way that you are serving our community by running. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Please remember to vote. Thank you, and good night.